Okay, today I have a lot to cover if we're going to move on to other things. So we're going to skip the pleasantries today. It's been long enough, so I will actually ask everyone to like, comment, and subscribe. Also check out our community Discord link in the information below to keep up with silly theories about my rewrite. On with the show. Sasuke has had the luck of being able to recover as he's watched the fights. However, an extra hour isn't enough time to have him gained back much more than his breath. On the other hand, Kankuro looks like he hasn't just endured 5 days in that forest. Then again, Sasuke thinks to himself, he hasn't. The Sand siblings got back in 18 hours. Kankuro's so well rested he may have put on weight. The downside, however, is that one of Kankuro's two puppets, Crow, was destroyed by the Earth Ninja. He only has Black Ant to aid him. Black Ant is a special puppet with the ability to imprison foes for quick and easy executions. Sasuke's never seen or even heard of a puppeteer before and needs to figure out how to fight inanimate objects. It's obvious to him that Kankuro somehow controls it, but without the how, he can only rely on destroying the puppet or its master. Kankuro tosses periodic shuriken while Sasuke is attempting to dodge Black Ant's large sweeping strikes. But Sasuke is totally exhausted and trips when he attempts to avoid a wide strike from Black Ant. Taking full opportunity, Kankuro traps Sasuke inside of Black Ant, whose arms detach and reveal poisoned blades. Surprised by the hollow body of Black Ant, Sasuke is stunned by how tough its body is as he slams his fists and feet against it. Kankuro warns Anko that the next step of his tactic for this puppet might have a lethal outcome, but goes ahead with it anyway. Black Ant's arms rotate around the barrel body as they line up with the small slits they're meant to slip through. Content with his aim, Kankuro thrusts all the blades toward the body at the same time. Black Ant's body suddenly explodes, sending its shattered remains scattering across the arena. From within the prison, Sasuke decides to sacrifice the use of his Sharingan for the fight to eke out one last ninjutsu, the boulder that he'd already copied. Conjuring it from within such a small space would doubtlessly cause problems for him, but if he stayed there any longer, he was bound to lose anyway. Flashing into existence, the boulder pushes Sasuke hard against the back wall of Black Ant, forcing him to survive a crushing as the rest of the boulder explodes out in every other direction. As Sasuke collapses to the ground, his boulder thrusts forward in a hail of splintered wood, and Kankuro barely dodges out of its way, his foot struck by the boulder. Limping only slightly, Kankuro looks at his second destroyed puppet in shock. Willing himself up, Sasuke pulls out his last tool, a length of wire. Wrapping his forearm sleeves around his hands to protect them from the wire, he wraps it tight around them. Still in control of Black Ant's arms, Kankuro regains focus and turns them on Sasuke. For context, I'm just going to use kunai on screen for Kankuro's puppet arms. Couldn't find a picture of them alone to save my life. Without his Sharingan, it takes far more deliberate action to dodge the thrusting knives. Loosening the wire so it forms a loop in the middle, he successfully catches one of the flying arms in that loop before pulling tight and preventing its escape. Crushing the mechanism, Sasuke frees the blade and brandishes it against Kankuro, who's only growing more irked. Still dodging, Sasuke wraps the wire around the blade so he can use it as a mid-range bladed sling. Sasuke keeps it drawn in so Kankuro can't even tell that the two items have been tied together. As Sasuke dodges the enemy's blades, he slowly gets closer to Kankuro until his weapon is within range. In a showy spin, Sasuke flourishes at its apex by hurling the blade at Kankuro. Kankuro dodges too slowly again, as he was mounting his own strike. As Sasuke is struck in the back by a blade, Kankuro is also cut in the arm. Sasuke gives a slight tug and retrieves his sword, to Kankuro's fury. Rattled, his puppet arms fall uselessly to the ground as Sasuke begins spinning the blade in hand and closing the remaining distance to Kankuro. In a panic, he attaches several chakra strings to the armored pieces of Black Ant and pulls them to himself to guard against Sasuke's strike. Though he protects his chest and head, Sasuke aims instead for his unprotected legs. Cut twice now by a poisoned blade, Kankuro already feels their effects, as his arm goes numb and his leg gets weak. Willing himself to his feet, Kankuro engages the injured Sasuke and falls right through him. A knee to his back, Kankuro is pinned by Sasuke and one of Kankuro's pickpocketed kunai. Anko then calls an end to the match and gets the names on the screen flying again. Sakura yells down at Sasuke that he should get his own tricks instead of stealing magnificent genjutsu ideas from her. Turning to look at Sakura up above, Sasuke smirks and gives her a wave of recognition. Sasuke had actually stored a genjutsu while watching Sakura fight. Of all the genin, Sakura uses low chakra jutsu with ultra precision. It was the best jutsu for Sasuke to mirror in his state. As Sasuke tries walking back to his team, the poison spreading through his back causes pins and needles across his arms and legs. Kankuro is made then to provide the antidote for them both. By the time Sasuke and Kankuro have been taken care of and cleared from the arena, the names have finally stopped. Omoi of the Cloud versus Ino Yamanaka. Jumping to his feet, Omoi descends the stairs and enters the arena. The toothpick he'd been playing with before, he places firmly in his mouth and crosses his arms and waits for Ino to come down. Ino shivers at her opponent's demeanor. Omoi seemed like a half-wit when he was trying to speak to Tenten earlier, but now he seems like the personification of intimidation. In order to get down the stairs, Ino has to pass by Team Asuma, but she's become incredibly unsure of Naruto. She didn't realize the fox could so easily burst from him. At any point, could the fox again jump out of him? How could Naruto ever be trusted with such a beast inside of him? Slowly creeping past him, Ino can't help but stare at him, and Naruto looks at her uncertainly as well. He seems to sense her newfound concern about him. Clearing her throat, Ino looks away from him and descends the stairs. Never mind him, she has to somehow fight Omoi. She knows nothing about him, and the sword on his back suggests a wildly different fighting style than she has. Goosebumps run down her skin as she stands opposite him and panics about how she'll fight him. In a shocking shattering of her confidence, Ino shakes her head at Omoi and mouths the words, "Give up." Looking up at the balconies, she sees Shikamaru has gotten up to watch. She then looks for Choji, Kiba, and Rock Lee to ground her once more in courage. But she's allowed herself to completely lose her bearings as Omoi appears beside her, ramming his fist into her gut. Omoi remarks that she has no meat on her bones, so strikes will inevitably hurt more. Anko had already started the match, but Ino had uncharacteristically distracted herself with her onlookers. Lee shouts for her to focus, and Kiba tells her that she can do this. Choji cheers loudly and unintelligibly on the opposite balcony. Cracking his knuckles, Omoi surges some of his lightning through his hands as a show of power and control. While Omoi stands dismissively above her, Ino forms several hand seals while pretending to be on her knees. Rising fast, she finishes her water wall jutsu, encasing and dousing Omoi. As the water created from the jutsu forms a wide puddle across the floor, Ino taunts Omoi with any lightning use as she creates more distance. He might just electrocute himself now that he's drenched. But Omoi remarks that he doesn't need lightning to take care of her. Keeping his sword sheathed, he appears beside her in another burst of speed. As he reaches to hook her head into a submission lock, Ino catches him and locks their arms together. Omoi wonders what she'll do next, pausing to see. She presses her fingers together and activates her mind transfer jutsu. Reflexively, Omoi charges lightning through his body against the unknown jutsu. As her defenseless body is struck by lightning, Ino's consciousness is also struck with indecision to return as it enters Omoi's body. This confusion causes both their bodies to fall limp for a time, as both are also being jolted by his lightning. Only seconds pass and Ino returns to her body, rolling away to escape the lightning. Tired and aching, Ino allows herself a moment to catch her breath, since victims of the mind transfer are often out for several more seconds than she. When she looks up to see what state Omoi's in, he kicks her in the face and knocks her out. Putting a new toothpick in his mouth, Omoi looks down at her, intrigued by what she was trying to do. Leaf ninja with Hiden techniques are a subject of curiosity for the Cloud, like watching the fat kid enlarge his body even more. Karui shouts down to him that he beat up a defenseless little girl, and Omoi looks up at her and shrugs like he doesn't care. A medical team comes down to retrieve Ino, though she's not too battered. Jumping down to meet him in the arena, Karui punches him in the shoulder and tells him to get out of her arena. With only 2 contestants left, Anko needs not run the randomizer. Gaara comes down in much the same way as he does in canon, but Karwi is not at all dissuaded as she focuses on him with fury drawn on her face. Before Anko has set action for the fight, Karwi draws her sword. She knows that Gaara is the Jinchuriki of the sand and has an ungodly amount of chakra at his fingertips. She also knows that B, the Cloud's own Jinchuriki, is well known to rein in his power, but others are not going to be so measured. Lip curling into a snarl, Karwi initiates her first tactic. She tells him that he and his entire nation are cowards that hide in the safe shadows of the leaf to evade the endless war. All this bloodshed, all this misery, the deaths, the destruction, everything, and the nation has cowered in their sand castles. He stares at her mutely as she complains about the sand's apparent transgressions. Had they chosen a side, any side, at any point, the war of the last 40 years would have come to an end by now. To the Cloud, the sand is the sole reason why the war has never ended. They might be weak and cowardly, even spineless, but Jinchuriki are hard to come by. All it takes is one to turn the tides, and they've been hiding all this time. They've been doing nothing but grow rusty and soft. Running lightning through her blade, Karwi leaps through the air and drives it down at Gaara furiously. Gaara doesn't even try to defend, as her sword strikes him clean on the top of his shoulder. Her lightning infusion cuts through his sand armor at first, but his sand rushes to reinforce that point in his armor faster than she can cut through it. Before she knows it, his charring sand covers her sword completely and seals it against his shoulder, so she can't even pull it away now. Expecting a counterattack, Karwi releases her stuck sword and leaps backward. Gaara relaxes the sand on his shoulder and breaks the sword free. He looks at the sword for only a moment before throwing it back to Karwi. He tells her to try again, as many times as she wants. At this time, Ino re-enters the arena, having woken from her knockout. Not wanting to interrupt the fight, she stays at the entrance and watches. Tamari stands with her, having regained enough motor function to walk around, and eager to see who her brother will destroy. Hinata too stands beside, peeking out to watch the fight. Karwi knows that in a battle of chakra, Gaara will win, but she never expected his inferior element would be able to so clearly dominate hers. Theirs was the best Genin team of the Cloud Village chosen to come for these exams, and Gaara is still making her look like a chump. Clicking her tongue in annoyance that Omoi might be the only one to move on, Karwi charges lightning into her sword again. Instead of swinging it at Gaara, she goes for a powerful jab. But like before, her sword strikes his sand armor and just stops, as more sand tries to coil around her blade. She's never fought an earth element and lost before. Perhaps she underestimated the power of an unfiltered Jinchuriki. All this time that she's been fighting, she failed to notice the sand collecting on the ground around her. Before she can pull back and try a different form of offense, the sand springs to life around her and traps her in a sealed cocoon of sand. Lifting his hand up, he activates his sand coffin jutsu. Only due to her last-ditch surge of lightning is Karwi able to weaken the force of his sand and escape a deadly fate. Drawing even more sand to his cocoon, Gaara repeats the jutsu. Catching his hand and intercepting the jutsu, Darui tells him to release her. Surprised that the Jonin got so close to him so quickly, Gaara attempts to carry on anyway. Brandishing black lightning, Darwi's bare hand easily cuts through Gaara's sand armor and into his flesh. Now that Darwi's made him bleed his own blood, Gaara begins to have a panic attack. Beginning his transition to beast mode, Gaara screams as he grasps at his head, and Baki appears beside him, applying a seal to him, immediately calming the beast within him. Shocked by the near explosion of a second Jinchuriki, Ino wonders why the villages are putting these bombs inside children. She shakes her head, repulsed by the idea. Tamari tries to calm Ino, telling her that Gaara has surprising control over his beast, despite acting crazy sometimes. Hinata too tries to affirm that Naruto isn't a ticking time bomb. Being in the same team as him, this was the first time she'd ever seen him lose control. Raido jumps in as Darui and Baki nearly come to blows with one another. The sand cocoon loosens and frees Karui, who luckily still draws breath. When his words don't work and his body is all he can manage to keep the two separated, Raido shouts for Naruto to get his dad. Finally, given reasonable permission to use the flying Raijin, Naruto forms the necessary seals and finds himself in a tree. In front of him, Minato and Jiraiya stand, looking down at him. He tells them about the problem with the sand and cloud in the tower, and Minato immediately travels with him back to the tower. Though Naruto reappears beside Asuma, his dad is already beside Raido, helping him push the two men apart. Minato shouts for the proctor to finish up as he grabs hold of Darui and Baki, and Raido touches his shoulder, and all four vanish from the room. A sedated Gaara falls backward, caught by Temari. After waiting for everyone to relax a bit, Anko gets a medical team in for Karui and calls all the past contestants to come forward. Neji Hyuga is still in medical treatment, so his name will be drawn by the proctor. Name drawing? Yes! Anko explains to everyone that her part in the exams is done, and so Phase 3 will be watched over by Iruka Umino, who appears in a burst of cloud beside her. All the Leaf Genin obviously recognize him as their teacher from the academy, so he gets a warm reception. However, sparing no pleasantries in this moment, Iruka tells them that he'll explain what's to come next. He explains to everyone that Phase 3 is a tournament style much like they just had. However, there is a 2-week rest period between now and then, so that everyone may get last-minute training in and heal up. But they're all to draw their names now, so they can train for their specific opponents and show the best of what they can do before the judges. One by one, they all grab their tickets and return to their lineup. They show their numbers to Iruka, and he writes them on the board for the Phase 3 tournament. In the first bracket, it's Naruto Uzumaki versus Sakura Haruno. Naruto giggles at his pick and points at Sakura smugly. She turns stern and gives him a threatening invitation to come closer. In the second bracket, it's Tenten of the Leaf versus Omoi of the Cloud. Omoi perks up at his coming opponent, excited to clash against the Kiba blades. Tenten's a little uneasy. Even with her special swords, Omoi hasn't shown his sword skill yet. She put all her abilities out there for everyone to see, but Omoi showed nothing. In the third bracket, it's Shino Aburame versus Gaara of the Sand. Shino and Gaara stand unchanging at their drawn lots. Shino's brows furl ever so slightly, little enough that no one notices. He already has a plan. In the fourth bracket, it's Rock Lee versus Sasuke Uchiha. Rock Lee looks over at Sasuke, curious how the Sharingan would fare against him versus the Byakugan. Sasuke meets his gaze, confident that working from 100%, Rock Lee stood no chance against him. And Neji gets a bye in the first round. Satisfied with the lots drawn, Iruka turns to them all. He tells them they're free to do absolutely anything in terms of training leading up to the Phase 3 tournament. He tells them that not just the 3 Kage, but all the Lords of the Land and various Jonin and Chunin will be watching their next fight. Their sole goal is to impress the people that matter. Showboating or prolonging a fight for the sake of a grudge will impress no one. You will humiliate your foe and automatically fail yourself. Additionally, killing is officially forbidden from this point onward. What they do in that final arena must be controlled. With the rules and gravity of their final phase explained, Iruka claps his hands together and dismisses them. In 2 weeks, they're all to meet again in a grand arena with a vast audience. And that's the official end of Phase 2. I hope everyone enjoyed the fights and their outcomes. I also hope that everyone understands some of the messages I try to convey. One thing that I've learned through my version of the Forest of Death is that a lot of people aren't understanding the scale of power I've implemented. So something like Darui easily injuring Gaara was to indicate that. Minato pulled the Jonin away to rid the tournament of distractions, but that wasn't because he needed help to restrain them. A Kage is so far above a Jonin that it's clear as night and day, and a Jonin is so far above a Genin that they don't even need a blade to cut them. On that note, Darui's use of black lightning and cannon is disappointing to say the least. So showing him easily getting through Gar's armor was just a perfect way to illustrate its power. Anyway, Friday's episode will be noticeably different from the rewrite, as I cover some personal stuff regarding the channel and achieving 1,000 subs. And then Monday we'll be getting a reprieve from the fights as our various genin find different ways of training for what's to come. As always, the sky's the limit.